You've got a 21-year-old airman dead, and the weapon meant to protect him may actually be to blame, with now widespread accusations and viral videos pointing to the Sig Sauer pistol having major issues. So the man killed was 21-year-old Braden Lovin, who had been serving out on a base in Wyoming, but also beyond that, military investigators aren't giving many details. And officially, all we know is that, quote, the incident involved a firearm discharge that is currently under investigation by Air Force Office of Special Investigations and the Air Force Global Strike Command Safety Office in collaboration with the Air Force's security forces. With them then going on to add that at this time, no determination has been made regarding the nature of the discharge. And that, it had already raised some eyebrows, but then on Monday, you had the base suspending the use of Sig Sauer's M18 pistol, which was followed a few days later by Sig Sauer posting on X, "Our hearts are with the service members and families impacted by the recent reported event at the F.E. Warren Air Force Base. We proactively offered assistance to the U.S. military as they investigate the incident and remain willing to help in furtherance of their ongoing inquiry." With all of that seen as a massive clue that the likely culprit was the M18 pistol itself, and it led to accusations that the gun can just go off. Right, and that, it would already be a cause for concern since the M18 is used by all the military branches, but then you add in the fact that its civilian version, the P320, it's one of the most popular pistols in America, and there are a ton of people allegedly at risk. And so the big question at the center of this is, can the gun just go off? And it's where things get controversial. Right, some P320 owners and SIG itself claim that it's not possible if the trigger isn't intentionally pulled. And in cases where the gun does seem to accidentally fire, they often blame things like unofficial holsters for pressing on the trigger and allowing it to fire. However, this weekend you had a video by the Wyoming Gun Project going viral, and it showed that, yeah, it sure as hell looks like a P320 can fire unintentionally and in circumstances that should never lead to a gun firing. And this is also where I need to get a little technical, but I will make it quick. The SIG P320 is a striker-fired pistol, meaning that inside of the gun itself, there's a spring-loaded pin that flies forward when the trigger is pulled, that hits the bullet and goes boom. This is an extremely popular design across almost all modern pistols, with one of the only drawbacks being that it doesn't have a safety that actually prevents the firing mechanism from going off, unlike hammer-fired guns. Right, instead, striker-fired guns generally have a funky-looking trigger since it has a mechanism that needs to be pressed to even continue pressing the trigger. And that is specifically to prevent the gun from accidentally going off if the trigger gets caught on something, since the circumstances of something squeezing the trigger in a way that replicates it being deliberately pressed is extremely unlikely. Now, with all that said, look at the P320 and you'll notice something instantly. It doesn't have what some call that dumb-looking trigger like a Glock does or any Springfield or almost any other striker-fired gun does. Now, that alone, it's not the end of the world, but couple that with the P320's allegedly poor build quality and it's a recipe for disaster, at least according to the Wyoming Gun Project. Right, and in the video, he uses a screw to simulate the trigger being slightly pressed and then starts doing things like pulling the gun in and out of a holster to see what'll make it go off. And what he discovered is that, and I'm skipping a lot of technical stuff here, is that the gun, it can go off if the trigger is slightly depressed and the slide, the top part of the gun, is hit.
There is no reason in hell, if you are touching, you're going through the firing sequence. Let's say you're taking up slack. You're a police officer and you decided you're going to shoot somebody and you're taking up slack in the trigger, and at the last minute they throw their gun down and you realize, oh, I'm going to stop. But you bump the slide, or you got your finger like that, and again, you go to reholster and it goes off. Or you're fighting with somebody and you put less than a millimeter of input in the trigger.
He then goes on to show that with the trigger barely being touched, all you have to do is press down on the slide for it to fire.
Let's see if we can touch the slide and get it to go off. Let's see if we can get it to go off again. Would you be able to?
And while a lot of people were just shocked that this was even possible, you had some pushing back and saying things like, "I set a brick on the gas pedal of my car and it drove off on its own." However, that kind of misses the point. Pulling a trigger is a binary thing, unlike a gas pedal. A gas pedal with almost any pressure will give some gas. A trigger is either the gun shoots or it doesn't. And as we've seen, it looks like you can press the trigger slightly and have the gun not shoot, but do that and then touch the slide and it can, which should not happen. And SIG has long claimed that the P320 will not shoot without a full trigger pull. And all of this is, I also should make it clear that the P320 does have other safety features to prevent accidental discharges, all of which were engaged in Wyoming Gun Project's videos. So even though the P320 lacks a trigger safety, it's supposed to have other things that stop it from just firing on its own. Though that being said, the lack of a trigger safety is still pretty crazy, as Ian from Forgotten Weapons has pointed out.
SIG did not put a trigger safety on the 320. Do you technically need it? No. It feels to me like they were very deliberate and left the trigger safety off as a way to differentiate themselves from the competition. Like, our triggers have a better press, they have a better feel, they don't have this little dingus hanging off the middle of the trigger because you don't need it, because we have all these other safety mechanisms, and that's why we're better. When in reality, I like that trigger safety, at least for me, the dingus in a Glock, that doesn't actually cause any real problem. It's not an issue with the trigger pull. And it very much does prevent accidental discharges with holsters, and that a trigger safety will often prevent from turning into a fired gun.
So this trigger situation appears to be bad enough, but it's also not the only alleged problem with the gun. You see, the Wyoming Gun Project measured about 0.5 millimeter of movement on the slide, which doesn't sound like a lot, but compared to other guns, it is. And just to give an example, here's Moist Critical with his Springfield XD.
You go to like move the slide, there's not even like the slightest give in it at all. But again, maybe that's common in some way.
Which, spoiler, it's not. But, with all of that said, one of the big questions is, well, what happens from here, right? What's next? And with that, you have a lot of people just asking, are SIG pistols even worth it? Especially when you consider that all of this, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. SIG, they've already been involved in lawsuits because of this exact pistol already. Shortly after it was first released, there were reports that if it was dropped, it would fire, something that should not happen with any modern gun. And then there were more and more reports coming out that the gun was just going off with one piece in 2023, highlighting that at least 80 people claimed to have been wounded without pulling the trigger. However, getting SIG to take responsibility, it's been extremely difficult. And so, for example, in the case where a drop P320 could fire, SIG only offered a voluntary upgrade rather than issuing a recall. And it's refused to acknowledge that the P320 is at all responsible for accidental discharges. So with all that said, as we're waiting to see how this plays out, you have people, well, the internet's gonna meme. And so you're seeing people meme about this with things like firearm safety rule number 1, treat every firearm like it's a Sig Sauer P320. But, in all seriousness, 1, there's obviously still gonna be an investigation into the death that sparked this whole thing. But also 2, regardless of how that turns out, SIG, they appear to have a PR nightmare on their hands. So also, that might be where that ends, because despite all the lawsuits, there might not be much recourse for people. And that because New Hampshire, where SIG's US operations are based, they just so happen to pass a law 2 months ago that kills product liability claims against gun makers based on the absence or presence of safety features like the special trigger striker fired guns normally have. That being said, though, if a different defect can be proven to be the reason that the gun goes off, then there could be some wiggle room there, but it's going to be a major roadblock. So in the meantime, while we wait to see what happens, especially if you are a part of the gun community, I would really love to know your thoughts on this.